We need diversification to give consumers choice. And I'm concerned that the big builders won't build unless there's sufficient demand in the regions.
I can't think of any other example where there's no licensing in place. Even a gas guy has to come and have a gas certificate, doesn't
Well,
he?
that's protected by law. Doing degrees that have no or very little market relevance. And so when they graduate, they're getting jobs that are poorly paid.
Hello and welcome to our first episode of Build Up from the Basement, part of our Build Up series of podcasts here at the FMB. I'm Iona, and for those of you who don't know, the Federation of Master Builders is the UK's largest construction trade body. And with me today, I have our CEO, Brian Berry, and our Head of External Affairs, Jeremy Gray. And there are a lot of announcements over the past week about the industry, and we're going to start with what Rachel Reeves had to say yesterday. So, Jeremy, can you give us a rundown, oh my God, of what is going on, of what was said yesterday by Rachel Reeves?
Sure. Well, it looks like they've pinned their hopes on construction. All their growth seems to be coming from house building numbers. So we've seen they're looking at 0.2% by 29-30, and then over 10 years we'll get 0.4% growth. Sounds small, but it represents billions of pounds in new growth to the UK economy. But I suppose the issue is it's a sliding scale of confidence. So we're seeing a drop off. We're seeing people move into potential poverty. So you're looking at, is confidence going to be knocked in the market? What's the impact that going to have on our members that are builders in terms of they need that consumer cash to go into projects? And this comes at a time when national insurance is going up. There's nothing for first-time buyers, and council tax is going up. So we're just seeing people taxed. So where that cash is now being taken away from the consumer, our builders won't have work to do. And I suppose the biggest announcement is the rollback from 1.5 million homes to 1.3 million homes, which seems to be the first in maybe a slide back on that very.
I thought that was very interesting. Actually,
that was really
1.5 to 1.3 million homes. So, despite their strict adherence to the 1.5, first time we heard that figure, 1.3. That said, though, that would still be the highest building rate in 40 years. So, let's not knock it, but it isn't the 1.5 that they said. And I think, Jeremy, you're absolutely right with what you've just said, but there's no help for first-time buyers to get on the housing ladder. And when you think the affordability ratio, I know in London it's 14-1 compared to 9-1 in 2009. So it's almost impossible to get on the housing ladder in London.
Yeah, totally impossible. Take it from someone who knows. Also, we will come back to that, actually, that figure about the housing numbers. But also the Chancellor was saying, she started off her statement by saying, I want to back builders, not blockers. Is she actually doing that?
Well, look, to be fair, this is a government that's really focused on house building and the planning system, making it much more flexible and faster. And also they've talked about 5 million homes to be retrofitted. We're not hearing as much about that, are we, in terms of the 5 million homes. So my concern is, actually, who's going to build these homes? Because the housing market at the moment is dominated by the volume house builders. 80% and growing probably of all homes are built by the big developers. What's in it for the small ones? And that's important, not because we just represent SMEs. We need diversification to give consumers choice. And I'm concerned that the big builders won't build unless there's sufficient demand in the regions. Whereas if you had smaller developments all across the country, you'd get that economic growth that is absolutely essential in every village, every town, every city across our country.
Okay, thanks, Brian. And that actually goes on, to economic growth. Jeremy, do you want to explain a little bit more about that? Because, builders are being responsible for sort of kickstarting the economy here, aren't they?
Yeah, well, they pinned all their hopes on the growth is going to come from house building numbers. Yeah. But the reality is, as Brian was pointing out, volume house builders will not oversaturate the market with the numbers that are really needed. They're not going to bring down house prices. It just doesn't fit their private industry. It doesn't fit their business model.
People don't understand that. Can you just go into that a bit more? Because that's actually really interesting.
Well, it's the difference is with, say, our members, SME builders, they have to build. The cash flow businesses are not based on debt. They're not borrowing. Some will when they start to progress up the chain. But the reality is they need to build. They need to get houses done in local areas because that's their business model. Volume can sort of sit, basically. It's never going to oversaturate the market. It's never going to build too many. And it's always been unusual since the start of this government. To an extent, they've felt that that's going to happen and house prices are going to come down. and everything's going to correct itself. But it's just not how the market works, and that's why we need to see more SMEs coming into that market. Purely because our members will start to build organically throughout the country rather than these big strategic sites, and it seems to all be about numbers at the moment.
And let's not forget, housing over the centuries developed organically. It's only since the mid-20th century that we've seen this approach to planning, where you've got large developments on the edge of market towns, which is where a lot of people object. You know, they see thousands of homes built on the edge of their market towns. There's a lot of objections to that happening. So I think even with this number going through and reforms to the planning system, we'll still see a lot of communities, lobby groups, arguing against this, and we can't just assume it's going to sail through. The planning and infrastructure bills going through Parliament at the moment. There will be a lot of discussion both within the Lords and the Commons, and it'll be interesting to see how quickly they get built through.
That's where the smaller builder comes in. I mean, you get this local objection. The smaller builders from those communities, they build, houses that people want in those places, and it's not just people don't feel an imposition. They haven't rocked up and built 5,000 homes on a field next to their house. They're building the type of homes people want, in the local design. And they know what the needs are.
Well, funny enough, I was talking to someone else from the industry yesterday who was saying that basically all these developers are copying and pasting. Basically, this is why we get the same type of housing, is because they're copying and pasting the same image because they know it'll be accepted by these local planning authorities, which is why we're not getting any variation. They're so ugly, which is another reason why people
Which is why we've got this
upset.
identical housing, these mock Georgian designs that you see. You could be in Cornwall, or you could be in Northumberland. You wouldn't know because the designs of the houses from the pattern books look very similar.
Yeah, exactly.
Not great.
No, not great.
And out of sync with the rest of the developed world.
Exactly.
It's very unusual in that respect.
Yeah, there is one country as well where they had to legally build different houses that look different each next to each one. They couldn't build the same one, the same style next to another one. I think that's a great policy. Brian, so what else do you think the government could be doing to actually supporting SMEs? What other policies could they be introducing to sort of support the sector?
Do you know what? I think one of the things we're concerned about is quality of homes has come up as an issue, but then it's about the Building Safety Act in terms of competence. What is the competence in the building industry? And as you may know, anyone can call themselves a builder in this country, which seems incredible, doesn't it? Any other professional trade is looked after in some way, but we could all go out this afternoon and set up as a building company, which is quite a frightening thought, actually.
Well, this is why we need licensing,
Yeah.
which we've been campaigning for years. Builders need to have that minimum level of competence proven.
And the consumer.
And it's safe for the consumer. The consumer knows how to check someone. There's proper repercussions for making mistakes, making errors when they're building. It's not the complicated route through the courts as it is now. It's just going to make the system better. It's really unusual that we don't have a licensing system. Completely out of sync again with many parts of Europe and the US and Australia, who all have systems to protect the consumer.
Do they?
And it professionalises the industry because you have to, you have that thing in your hand that says, I'm a builder.
And the other thing is, I think it would give consumers more confidence to have work done. We did a survey a few years ago. 1/3 of homeowners are put off having work done because they don't know who to go to. So if you had a form of licensing to demonstrate the competence of building companies, you'll probably get more work, which is going to be really important in terms of productivity, economic growth, all the things that the government's talking about. And it just seems very odd not to be able to demonstrate competence in the domestic building industry.
Yeah, and so many people have been affected by this. Dodgy builders is an ongoing story that's constantly covered, and people are going through horrible times with it. And yeah, it's something that definitely you'd think needs addressing. I can't think of any other example where there's no licensing in place. Even a gas guy has to come and have a gas certificate, doesn't he?
Well, that's protected by law.
Exactly.
And that's a really good example where it's mandated. Actually, you've got to have a licensed heating engineer to sort out your boiler.
Yeah. And that's part of the system. You have everyone regulated around the builder. The products are regulated, the architect's regulated, the planning part's regulated, the gas engineer, the plumber, but not the builder.
Who's at the bottom of the chain? Yeah.
And we've got the Building Safety Act now, and they talk about the golden thread in terms of making sure everyone is responsible and competent to do what they are carrying out. But when it comes down to the general builder, what does that mean? I'm not aware that we've got a defined definition of what a general builder does. So there's a lot of work to be done there, actually. So this will be really important, I think, going forward.
Yeah. That's very interesting. So the other announcement that was made this week was the 60,000 new construction workers. have been announced. So what, Brian, do you make of that?
Well, look, the first thing is, I think it's great that the government's talking about encouraging young people into our industry. It's not often we've seen government ministers saying, become a brickie. And for too long, the emphasis has been about going into higher education. We had the Blair government saying 50% of young people to go to university, doing degrees that have no or very little market relevance. And so when they graduate, they're getting jobs that are poorly paid. Far better to encouraging people into the trades. We know that actually young people can earn a good salary. And on top of that, if they're very entrepreneurial, they set their own business, they can run their own company, and it can lead into other aspects in construction, become an architect, a surveyor, a designer. It gives up a whole range of opportunities for young people. So it's really good that the government is focusing on this. The 600 million, very positive, because we know it's really tight in terms of the financial budgets. They've talked about 10 colleges of technical excellence, but these are existing colleges, by the way. They're not additional.
So they're going to be improving those colleges,
They're going
do
to
we
be
think?
improving those. And I would say for local builders, I'm slightly concerned, will that money be spread across the country, or is it going to gravitate just towards the technical colleges?
Because that's the issue we tend to find. It goes into boot camps and large sort of projects, which tier one companies, others all benefit from. They can get people through the sort of mechanized education system, but our members are the ones on the ground doing the training, and it's they're doing it directly and need the funding to them and the help through the system of training up apprentices. So
they need a big incentive to do that.
They need a massive incentive
because it's costly.
They need help.
Yeah. And we know actually that half the people undertaking apprentices drop out for various reasons.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
We need to find more employers to take them on. And we know that the biggest barrier is the lack of financial incentives. £1,000 for an employer won't cut it.
Right.
So they do need to be, it needs to be attractive to take on young people, because it takes time for a small business, so that affects their productivity. So we do need to be looking at it. I hope the government will be looking at it in more detail.
Yeah, and also where we're going to get the teachers from for all these colleges. I do worry about that slightly.
Yes. And I mean, this is a perennial issue. I mean, we have an aging workforce. Will people go into colleges after they retire? There's questions around that. I mean, there have to be incentives. Certainly, the sort of pay rates in colleges for people coming off a very lucrative building career and then going into
taking a pay cut.
Yeah, basically going into colleges and taking a pay cut, and spending a lot of time with people that they really need to incentivise into these careers. It's not, doesn't seem like the best route forward potentially.
No, but it is quite good to capture that experience. I think the problem will be that people who have got a skilled trade, going into colleges, they want to be able to pass on that knowledge, but they get weighed down by all the other educational requirements and the paperwork in colleges. So somehow I think we need to be looking at that, divorce that out. Let's get those people who have retired passing on their skills, but take some of the paperwork off them, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Very interesting, both of you. Okay, so what do we think in the long term this is going to look like? I mean, are we going to see builders really, SMEs protesting outside Parliament, beeping their horns in fury that they've got no work? Seriously, is this going to end up, we're going to see a sort of nationalised housing?
No, I mean, I think it's, I'm still not sure they're going to, I mean, even the 1.3 is extremely ambitious in terms of housing numbers. I think it's just the sheer numbers of people you need into the industry to actually start building it. I mean, the 60,000's a step in the right direction, but I've heard, privately, much larger numbers are actually needed. We know at least 250,000 just to sort of keep the lights on in the build, amongst builders. There's definitely an additional couple of probably 100,000 on that to deliver the 1.3 it is now. But then you also have to take into account things like retrofitting. The government said nothing on that. That's another huge growth area we need to look at. I mean, and as I mentioned at the top, that it's with confidence the way it is, you might start to see a knock to your sort of general builder that's doing domestic work. Do people have the cash in the bank to actually commit to getting their kitchen done or getting an extension put up? So it's going to be a tricky
I think
couple of months.
What's concerning me is there'll be an increasing focus on those numbers. I mean, Angela Rayner has stated very clearly, she wants to deliver 1.5, looks like 1.3, but she's going to be really focusing on those numbers, especially as they approach the general election. And that could be at the expense of SMEs. I'm still concerned there isn't sufficient leeway there to bring in those micro house builders. And to give a good example, that National Planning Policy Framework, the guidance there, they haven't changed the percentage of land in local plans for small sites. Why not? Why not? I mean, they talk about diversifying the housing market, but in practice, we're not seeing those tangible policies that would really help. So that, I think, will be a concern.
That's about lifting barriers for the SMEs, isn't it?
Well, it's investment in the planning
And
system.
investment in the
Because it seems big picture, but if you invest in the planning system, SMEs need a bit more of a hand through the planning system, and that's just been shed throughout the last 30, 40 years. All that sort of help has disappeared. We've seen the paperwork go up, the help go down, and then strangely that also correlates with the amount of SMEs dropping out the housing system. So that all needs to be addressed.
And they're going to say, well, we're putting in 300 new planning officers, but it takes time. Where they're going to come from?
Exactly.
Train them.
Well, that's
all this takes time.
300 is
right.
0.7 per planning authority, so it doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah, that's a good figure.
Yeah.
Right, okay, yeah, that's not very much. Talking of retrofitting, Brian, you were on the Energy Net Zero Select Committee giving evidence.
I was indeed
correct?
giving all evidence to
Yeah,
the House of Commons.
that's scary. You've done that quite a lot, though.
Do you know, it's always scary. I know. I don't. It's not something anyone particularly enjoys. This was an inquiry about the workforce in terms of actually what needs to be done to deliver clean energy jobs. I mean, first question is, what is a clean energy job? I'm not really sure. I'm not sure they're really
I'm
sure.
not sure they knew either.
No.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So I tried to focus it much more on that retrofit because that's the market that we should be developing. It aligns itself with the 5 million homes that the government has said. And I think what was interesting with those giving evidence yesterday was actually we've got to create a market. There's got to be demand there. So there's no point just training up people if there's no demand.
Yeah.
And that's the concern which we talked about earlier about the economy. People are going to feel less secure in their jobs. They've got less money to spend. Not good news for retrofit. Not good news for house building. So this is a message that we were able to put back to the committee. So hopefully that will get feedback into the government.
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Well,
It's a sort of relentless drive of decarbonisation, which is fine in the heating system, but you've got to focus on the fabric of the house as well, which seems to get lost quite a bit.
Yeah, exactly, because you can't put all this retrofitting into old homes.
Because it's just putting a heat pump in a cold house.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it healthier or safer.
Yeah, okay. And maybe they'll have to cut back on their net zero target. Thank you very much for joining us for our first episode of Build Up from the Basement. And we'll be back very soon with more builder news. And thank you so much to our brilliant guests who we've had. We've had Brian Berry, our CEO at the FMB, and Jeremy Gray, our Head of External Affairs. Thank you so much.